morning. Here it is, mid-December 2019. I'm setting my boat up now, how I'll be fishing for the rest of this year and early in the next year, and that's going to be spider rigging. I like to push these rods through the water. You catch a lot of different kinds of fish. You'll catch a crappie, catfish, bass, hybrids, stripers, whites, you name it. If it's out there, you'll catch it on it. I enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy watching this video. I'll include some video of me going out and catching some fish this past week. So just sit back, and I hope I'm able to help you catch you some fish. The rods I use for my spider rig system are these Black Widow made by B&M. It's a 13-foot rod. It's collapsible for storage. I have it set up with a little old Zebco Dock Demon 4-pound test, a little old half-ounce sinker, 30-pound swivel, and a little old jig head I make that has a electric chicken jig on it today. You can tip these jigs with minnows also, just whatever the fish tell you that they need for the day. And whenever I do my pulls on my reel, as I mentioned in one section of this video, from the face of this reel to this first eye is a pull, and so I take a poker chip for every pull that I would make, and that will let me remember exactly how deep each of those of the presentation for that specific rod is. This is how I set up my spider rigging system. I have, for demo purposes, just set up the right side of the boat, put 3 rods on it. I can fish up to 5 rods if need be per side, but I've only got these 3 set up just to give an example of how you can cover an expanse of water and at varying depths. Each rod can be set at a different depth, at a different angle, and just whatever you're covering, if you're covering a bluff wall or if you're covering creek channels, and so that you can, as you mark bait fish and as you mark fish, you can target those fish, and whichever depth that they're biting, that you're getting most consistent bites on, then you can change over, and also you can change your colors, because certain fish sometimes like certain colors with your jig, and if you tip them with minnows or otherwise. But it just allows you to fish a lot of different variables, and it is a deadly system. You'll catch a lot of fish spider rigging. To keep track on the depth, how I keep up with my different depths I'm fishing each rod, be it 3 rods, 10 rods, 8 rods, 6 rods, whatever how many rods I'm pushing that day. I keep up with them, that when I set a rod out, I always start with the length of the rod, which is 13 feet. And for every pull from the reel to the first guide, I mark that rod using a poker chip. So if this rod here is 13 foot and no depth, it's just 13 foot with no pulls, I won't mark it at all. That way, if I do catch a fish on it, I know they're setting at that depth. If it's this rod here, and I've got this one set, say 13 feet plus 3 pulls from the reel to the first eye, I will take 3 poker chips, and I'll place it under that rod, the butt of that rod, so that if I catch a fish or if I'm not catching fish, I know that at a certain depth exactly what, at any moment as I'm going over and I'm marking fish on my depth finder, that I can, if I see fish marked at a certain depth, I can look and see which rods are at that depth and see if those fish are striking. It's just a great little thing. If this rod here, I had it at 13 foot plus 5 pulls, I would simply take 5 poker chips and set under it. And like I say, it's just a great little reminder telling you exactly, as you vary the depths and the presentation for each of those jigs, because the jigs may be of a different color, or they may be tipped with a minnow, or it may only be a minnow, but as you catch those fish, you'll be able to keep track. In addition to these depth chips that I use to keep track of how deep they are, I also keep up with the number of fish that I catch per rod, and I use it by using colored chips. So if I catch a fish at 13 foot with no pulls, and I catch a fish on it, I just simply under that rod, I throw a chip, leave it. And I know that that was a depth. If I get all of a sudden I find out that this rod here, which is setting at 5 pulls, that I count 3 fish, I'll take 3 poker chips. So if I caught one, 5 minutes later I catch another one. A couple minutes later I catch another one. It just keeps up with the makes the system extremely simple. Works real well for me. That way, because especially if you're fishing with 6, 8, 10 rods, sometimes it gets confusing. And this here is a great little tip, and it's how I keep track of my fish. With spider rigging, to maximize catch rate, sometimes not only do you have to determine what depth the fish are at by fishing multiple levels until you can target exactly what depth they're at, you also have to target what color they want on a certain jig on certain days due to certain water conditions. To do that is that I always, whenever I'm setting out my multiple rods, I always have different colors at different depths. And when I determine that a certain depth or a certain color is producing fish, it just increases the odds that I'm going to have a very productive day and maximize my catch rate. Another important tool to have whenever you're out crappie fishing, or fishing with these long light weight rods, that you need a net. I have this little crappie net that I've extended the handle out. I've also put a pool noodle on it so that if it falls overboard it'll float. I don't know if you've ever lost a net. I have. But this net here also, even at night if I drop it over, it has reflective tape on it, so I'll be able to find it with my light. But when you're using these long rods and you try to flip in some of these fish, especially, like I say, crappie, which are also called paper mouths, that jig will pull out. But if you net or use a net, you'll catch a lot more fish. Another thing I always keep at hand whenever I'm spider rigging, that if I'm going to be fishing or looking for fish around different types of structure, from bridge pilings to trees, stumps, or any type of structure I find in a lake that's exposed to low levels or even at high levels throughout the year, that you keep this on hand, and it just increases your ability to locate and target some fish that you may not be able to see on your sonar. But I have a little old casting rod. I like using a float on some of them. Sometimes I'll just cast and reel with no float. They'll just have a weighted jig. But this one's set up for suspending at varying depths from 5 feet to 3 feet. It's a short little crappie rod. If I find out that the fish are, a lot of fish are stacked on certain type of structure, I will then shift over to just fishing that and get away from spider rigging. But it just increases your chances of being able to make sure that's a great day of fishing and a great day of catching.